Well, welcome to the roundup of the second round of the Gold Coast Open, and our pairings for round two looked as follows. We had a massive 17 people on 1 point out of one from a field of 37. Although it may be down to 36 if the junior Zarui Singh has to withdraw with illness. And on board one, we have Canberra's Fred Litchfield up against Timur Kubakarov, or we had. Board two, another Grandmaster Bobby Cheng up against 14-year-old Shravan Renjith. Officially is New Zealand, but has been playing in Australia for half his life. And then Canberra's Michael Kethra up against Xiaozong Wan. They're the three Grandmasters. Further down, Rishi Sardana, the fourth seed, up against the tricky Gene Nikauchi. And further down, well, the really interesting one is board 10 between two international masters, Stephen Solomon and Peter Froelich. So two of the four international masters are playing each other on board 10 because both of them were involved in an upset in the previous round. So let's see how things go. So I'll just move to ChessBase, and well, I think I'll go to the Solomon Froelich game first because that was a quite remarkable game. Now, Froelich played a Caro-Kann with knight a6. Now this just proves he's been hanging out with Alex Wall too often. It's not as if Alex Wall had such a fantastic score against Stephen Solomon. Both of them nearing 60, both I think 58 at the moment. And Peter Froelich, of course, is much younger, 49, but nonetheless, he picked up this idea. I can't remember exactly what Tony Miles called it. It might be the Holy Woly or something like that. I believe Alex Wall used it with success against some Grandmaster, perhaps Vladimir Pishin, but really it's not that great. It's all based on a trick. If bishop takes knight, black plays queen a5 check and avoids ruining the pawn structure and takes back on a6 with the queen with a pair of bishops. Even that's not clearly better for black, but it's playable. So instead, knight here, and here Solomon shows his sophistication. He just plays g3. There are plenty of other moves, but he's very happy just to put a bishop on g2 and pretend it's some sort of strange Piet's defense. So he's not really doing much. Knight h6, okay, that's consistent. h3, f5. The problem here is that e5 is a decent move. And if you swap, you can't take on e5 because h6 is hanging, and a queen swap is just going to leave white with very well placed pieces. So instead, knight f7, that forces f4, and bishop e6. Now sure, there's good control over those light squares. If white plays d5 at any point, then the e5 pawn will become weak. But there is a fair bit of space here, and I'm quite confident, in fact, that the long-term prospects for white are very good here. So queen here, knight d5, and now instead of swapping, which would meet bishop takes and then removing black's bad bishop, white simply castled, and that's really an excellent move. Knight e3, and probably a mistake. Queen takes, and d5. Black's got a pair of bishops, but has just created exactly the sort of position where you don't want a pair of bishops, because they're horribly locked in. And the rest of the game is just Solomon playing extremely well. b6, okay, c5 might happen one day, but in a way, white doesn't mind too much. White wants to be prepared for it. Now white's ready to go c4. And black has to go e6, so now that bishop on d7 is horrible. And white attacks from another side. It's not that g4 is leading anywhere in particular. Even if you get g5, h4, h5 in, it may not be that great. But instead, white is interested in swapping on d5 and playing rook to the 7th. And in order to distract from that, Froelich felt he had to swap on g4, but the problem is he's now created a new disaster for himself, and that is the possibility of f5 one day. So b5, sure, but c5. Now it's the king side white is going to win on, and white's queen is nearly ready to move so that f5 can be played. King up b4, there's one check threatened, f5 is coming, and black tries to decoy some white pieces away from there, from the c1 square. So if rook takes, he wants to go bishop g6 and maybe get some of his material back, but instead a lovely move, queen takes f5, not worrying about bishop g6 because you've got a counter pin. c1 is covered, so black has no attack, and rook takes g6 of course is coming. And you can't hold that. And he resigned because there was going to be rook h1 check, and that was going to be deadly. So just an impressive positional performance by Solomon. It does show the difference between someone who plays a bit and someone who's really been out of chess for a while, because maybe Froelich thinks, well, I might be able to hold this. This is worth going for. But in fact, it's a truly horrible position. And the longer the game goes on, the more it's clear that white has all the options. Even if black went b5 and a5, they'd be doing absolutely nothing around here. And white would go knight c1, knight d3, knight c5, something like that. It's terribly difficult to activate the knight on f7. If you ever go g5, white will just leave it alone. So there's really nothing to do here with black 3 bad minor pieces, and white just exploited that. So that was a relatively easy win for Stephen Solomon. We also had, let's see, where was it? Okay, Rishi Sardana against Jean Nicauchi. Now, this was one of the upsets. Of course, Jean Nicauchi is always very dangerous. He's been playing the E6 Sicilian all his life. In fact, his first coach was Peter Froelich. Nicauchi is still only 26 years old, but he was successful quite young, and he certainly had already started playing sophisticated openings when he was just 9 or 10. And Froelich coached him for years. He was really the only one who really could communicate well with Jean, and he taught him extremely well. Jean Nicauchi was a really strong player, really young, and although he has not gone on to take really big titles, he has won he came second in the Gold Cup Open earlier this year, but he's won the Wendy Terry Memorial. Last year came second in the Peninsula Open, so lots of decent results to his credit, but he's also a bit inconsistent, and that's part of the problem. He was Australian Junior Champion as far back as 2013, so it's really quite a while ago. So we have a pretty bad version of a Queen's Gambit Tarrasch. White has been able to take back on d4 earlier, and white has a knight on. Well, it's almost like it's it really is a bad version. So we don't have to go bishop g5 if we want. Bishop g4 is interesting, trying to encourage f3. F3 may not be bad, but queen d3, queen d7, and black's trying to exploit the fact that white's pieces aren't perfectly placed at the moment. Bishop g5 castles. Now black shouldn't be too unhappy, because this is back to something close to a normal line. Rook e1. If you take on f6 and take on d5, you can't because d4 is hanging. So rook e1 first. h6, trying to force that line. I seriously doubt that rook takes e7 works. I think you can probably take back with the knight. But here, in fact, Nicauchi has it all worked out, because after a3, instead of playing bishop takes c3, which would lose the d5 pawn, he simply goes d4. And there's not a good move here. Knight e4 sacrificed a lot, but after knight takes c2, knight f6, gf6, it's really hard to see how white can get enough attacking pieces to really hurt the black king. Knight d4 was played, but Nikauchi had this tricky knight c2, and really there's nothing going on here. You'd say black was slightly better, and he decided to trade in his bishops for an isolated c-pawn. Perhaps he's right. Takes here. Black would like to play b6 first, and maybe should, but there's rook e7, and it's going to be really hard to avoid all the queenside pawns coming off. So he goes for this sort of position, where his rooks are more active, but unfortunately if he goes rook b2 here, the answer would probably be rook d1, with ideas of bishop takes f7 or rook d8 checkmate in some lines. So black tries for g5, but the more pawns that come off the board, the more chances of a draw there'll be. Rook d4 is tricky. Bishop here, and if rook takes f2, rook takes d7. But of course, black has to swap, and now it's very, very close to a draw here. Sardana is going straight for the draw. And here, black plays this quite tricky idea of check, allowing king c4, and then check. King b5, rook check. Now, Sardana, if he'd got optimistic, and he did have a bit of a think around here, was wanting to try king b5. But then after king d4, rook b5, it turns out we can just swap. If pawn takes, we play a4, and we queen with check, and in fact black is better with a king sitting on e3. Oh, in fact it's winning because the queens come off. The white king will have to go to the b file, queens come off, and then king e3. And if you take with a king, then king e3, and I'd say that was probably winning for black as well. So in the end he decided, okay, I can't go king a6, I'll go king c4, and that just ended as a draw. So that was an upset for the number 4 seed, and really not any winning chances at all. I would say that that was very, very safe from Jean Nikauchi. So Rishi Sardana, the 24-year-old from Canberra, has conceded a draw. So and there was one draw conceded as well by one of the grandmasters, and that was Zhao Zhongwan. And he will be absolutely kicking himself because he played an excellent positional game. He's a pawn up here, you can see. This should be a matter of technique. He brings his king up the board in a minute. And now he's threatening to invade on g4, so at least if king h3, queen takes pawn check. Check. g6 is very good. And now the king gets further. Queen e3. And here there's plenty of good ideas for black. It's completely possible just to play b4 here. Or maybe check first is better. And then b4. Because if queen check, you just hide in here. No more checks. And yeah, you'll be winning soon enough. If queen f3, trying to set up some tricks, you can just go queen d5 again. And it all works out for black extremely well. But he played king h3, incredibly careless. And suddenly g4 check. And there is, well, if there is a way out, it'll involve king takes h4. But I doubt that that's going to work. After pawn takes pawn on h5, that still looks like it might be a perpetual. Instead, king takes, queen check. And Zhao had seen this far, but completely forgotten. He can just keep checking. And when you take the pawn, you have no escape. So, absolutely trivial perpetual check. Of course, Kethro had to CG4 check. I'm presuming king takes h4 doesn't escape. I wouldn't absolutely bet on it. Oh, you've got queen e1 anyway. Same checks. King g5, I'll go queen e5, and you can't get out because king h6, I've got queen h8 again. So there's no escape whatsoever. So, yeah, allowing the g4 check was just terrible. And, yeah, I was thinking b4 here was the simplest. Yeah, g4 is just too slow, even though it threatens queen check, because black will have all sorts of queen checks then. But perhaps it's even better to play b4 now. Check king here, and nothing to do. The pawns are great at stopping all the checks. So this is a real surprise. Now, we knew Michael Kethro, the Canberra player, was solid, but that is a big scalp of Zhao Zhongwan. So he has dropped half a point early, and in a tournament where you rather expect the top three seeds are going to absolutely dominate, the three grandmasters, Kubakarov, Cheng, and Zhao Zhongwan. This is a real blow for Zhao. Now, he works as a doctor in Coffs Harbour, so he's not fully professional like Kubakarov, but even so, he does keep himself up to date, as does Bobby Cheng, who also has a full-time job. But but sometimes, yeah, you just have a bit of blindness, and it may also be a question of age, because in 2 days' time, Zhao Zhongwan is going to be 37. And as chess players know, chess life ends at 40, or at least trying to be a really good player ends at about 40. You've got a few exceptions, Korchnoi, Anand, and so on, but it's really very tough. You look at the trajectory of many players, and they just don't have the same results after 40, and many after 35. So it is going to be tough. Again, 2 rounds a day is not easy, especially when you've just mucked up a long game in the first round. But that's definitely a bit of a worry. So all in all, this is not worked out well, and that's the 2 draws. Whereas the top 2 seeds had it fairly easy rather. Another Canberra player, Fred Litchfield, he tried to play solidly against Kubakarov's Grunfeld. Knight takes, bishop takes, but this line is absolutely fine for black. Black will not put the bishop on g7, but is going to try and go e5. That's why white played e5 himself, and that turns out to be really nasty. So take, well, take, bishop takes, takes, check, bishop here. You've won a pawn, but black's development is fantastic. And once you play rook e8, life is going to be very tough. And if you play king f2, then there'll be a rook d2 check. Perhaps knight h3 would have hung on here, but it's no, it's all very difficult. And after knight e2, rook e8, I suspect there's nothing to do around here. Kubakarov spent a bit of time making sure he absolutely put the boot in. Rook d5 and rook b5, and now it's hopeless. But the way black finished white off was absolutely wonderful. So if you play king d1 here, then rook b2 wins a piece. It looks like rook c2 holds, but he found the absolutely fantastic check, king here, and rook f1. Really lovely. And, well, you're going to be a piece down no matter what you do. Take, check, take. And, of course, white lost, but Litchfield took a little bit of time to blunder. So, yeah, a lovely little combination, rook check and rook f1. So that's one for the combination books. And so Kubakarov showing why he's top seed, taking apart with black the 12th seed, I believe, Fred Litchfield. So he's looking good, and so is Bobby Cheng. He took a little bit longer to demonstrate his superiority, but ultimately the pressure on knight a5 was probably a mistake. Rook d2 protected b2. The pressure on the a4 pawn held, and rook here is... I think this was Rengif's trick. And his idea is if queen d1, then you play take, take, and knight b3. The only problem is Bobby Cheng found a hole in the combination. Oh, by the way, if queen takes queen, rook takes rook check. But Bobby Cheng realized rook d4, and the c1 rook is protected now, and white is simply a pawn up. And it didn't take too much longer for white to put the pressure on, and now rook takes e6 looks rather good. Oh no, then takes and takes on d4, but bishop e3, and the threat is rook takes bishop on e6. If you go to f7, we can take on f7, and bishop d5 check, and that was enough for the 14-year-old Queenslander, and he gave it away. So really tricky stuff by Rengif. He thought he could get away with knight a5, and if he can, his knight's coming to c4 and to b3, but queen takes was good. If knight b3, you've got rook c7, and after rook here, which, yeah, it is a really nice idea. Sadly, rook d4 refutes it, and that was the end for Rengif. So our top two seeds have won. We have had draws on boards 3 and 4. Then relatively easy wins a bit further down, except for Dusan Stojic, who really had to suffer a lot to beat the 20-year-old from Melbourne, Teja Stata. And, okay, if you have a look at this position, Black's really got wonderful control of the position. I don't know exactly why he wanted to swap queens, but Black is still doing fine. White is the one trying to avoid a swap. And eventually, White played f3, which should clarify Black's advantage, but you've got to be a bit careful. And around here, there's only one king that's really not doing so well, and that is the White king, although queen e5 is annoying. And here the problem is that the b5 pawn could become weak later. So rook here takes, just in time, takes, king f2, and Black should be working out how to draw this, because Black's pawns aren't moving very quickly, and White's king is already fairly active. Perhaps you can play king f6 and e5 and king e6 and make sure White doesn't get d4 under good circumstances, but instead f5 was just a disaster. I have no idea why he played that. I'm worried about g4 perhaps, but it's truly horrible now. And now knight d4 is a huge threat. He went knight here, rook here, knight here, rook back. Now there's no knight f4 either. And unfortunately, after knight f6, knight g5, and it's game over. Although, I must admit, White did finish it in style, getting the Black knight to go back here, king f4, and Black should sit tight, but king g5 is coming, and instead play king here and just allowed knight takes b5. And I believe the game finished very soon after that. Well, no, he played on a little while, but of course it was, game over very, very quickly, because White's got 3 connected pawns, and Stojic, who's a bit of a veteran, even though he's only 32, but he was a top junior when he was very young. I believe he played World Youth Championships for Australia, and he's got the FM title, but as far back as 2006, he tied for first in a Dobell Cup, which was pretty impressive. He won the Victorian Open in 2012, and the Melbourne Chess Club Championship. He originally from Melbourne, but then he came up to Queensland about a decade ago. And yeah, he's been doing okay without doing outstandingly recently. Second in the Nel van der Graaf Memorial, I think, or maybe even second in the Queensland Championship, and he won the Nel van der Graaf, I think, last year. So, yeah, he's still having very decent results, but yeah, his rating is not what it used to be. So, Stojic is up there on 2 points, I believe. Hang on. No. Am I wrong? Yes, he is up there on 2 points. So he's doing fine. Aidan Brady and Mars Chi, who had the upsets, they played this incredibly solid game against each other. Lots of pieces came off, and ultimately it got a rook end game like this, which was finished up as a draw. Gareth Charles pulled off a rather nice attack against Josh Christensen, so the two Sydney players. Gareth Charles, a bit of a veteran, I guess, but let's see, Christensen's, yeah, he's already 30, so not so young, but Gareth Charles is almost 40. So very old-fashioned line. Used to see this in World Championship matches back in the 1920s. Take, knight takes, queen takes, and this f4 is one of these very decent ideas. If I go reference, I reckon I'll find games by Marshall or someone like that. Let's have a look. So queen e4 is the main line. It's supposed to be good. If I go back in time, let's see who we've got. Rubinstein on the white side. No Capablanca though. Colley, Thomas, and yeah. So, there's Capablanca. There you go, Capablanca, Thomas, and I think he went queen f6. But in any case, okay, queen came back to e7 here, and then came f5. And the idea is to keep that bishop stuck on c8 for as long as possible. And white's percentages here are very, very good. So, rook d8, queen h5, rook d6. Sure, you're stopping f6. But e4 is annoying because f7 is a problem. Now the d8 is a problem. That rook on h6 is not well placed. And after bishop d7, white had a long think here because f6 is tempting. You're going to have to take back with the pawn. But there's still no way to mate after rook takes, pawn takes. So instead, he went king in the corner and just kept control. Now he's thinking about e5. So he picked up a free pawn. Black is blockading those pawns, but there's no mate. Rook d2, all looks very active. Only problem is white's calculated it a bit better. Rook d6. Maybe you should swap and take on b2 here. It does give white... f6 isn't so great. So maybe black is doing okay. So maybe we should not have... grab that pawn on d8. Maybe that on a7. Because queen e5 was a bit annoying. Rook d2, rook here. He grabbed on with the bishop, and after rook d8, there are back rank problems everywhere. So the threat is what? Good question. Maybe just h3. Or if you got rook takes pawn check and queen e4 check. So maybe black's okay here. And it was only his next move, rook d6, that was a disaster. Because material is equal. So if queen takes e4 here, it looks as if rook e1 will kill you. I think that's true. So you can't take on e4 at the moment. But also you can't go g3 here, or h3 with white. So perhaps black should just play king f8. And that looks remarkably solid. Instead he went rook d6, and that allowed the very pretty queen c5, and that is game over. Attacking the rook, attacking the queen, and he tried queen takes, threatening mate, but that's a good enough decoy. Queen takes rook, and no problems at all. So it was a lovely queen c5 that actually ruined the position. I think white probably should have done better around here. I reckon this has probably happened. Now maybe queen g4 is a better move. So there's queen f3, queen e2, and queen g4. Or if I try a computer, they say queen d1 is a good move. Okay, so queen d1, bishop d7. And, okay, the obvious move e5. Why not? And, yeah, you just have f6 in your pocket all the time. King h1 was perhaps a little bit cautious. So that was Gareth Charles winning. He, though, lost his first round, so he is not up on 2 points. So let's have a look at the standings. I wonder if they've been updated. Let's have a look. No, they're not up yet. Let's have another look to see if they've been put up. Round 3 pairings are up. So, yeah, further down, no great upsets. Daniel Pavlovsky, the Melbourne junior, did beat Joshua Brown. Jaden Noy beat Adam Vag, but Vag is the bottom-rated player in the tournament. And a few draws for people trying to get onto the scoreboard. So our round 3 pairings are as follows. Timur Kubakarov against Jack Piccini. So we have the top seed against Jack Piccini, one of the late entries actually. And I think, if I'm not wrong, he's not 6th seed. Yeah, it's up there anyway. So Yi Lu, who's tied for Australian Open championships and certainly can play. He's rather low-seeded, I think, but maybe because of a lack of play. Up against Bobby Cheng, that could be very interesting. Brody McClimate is now on board 3. He's up against Dusan Stojic, and I would really like Brody's chances. He's only 29, still playing very sharply, good opening theory, and Dusan Stojic's opening theory is sometimes not quite deep enough, in my opinion anyway. Board 4, we get to the people on 1.5, only 6 people on 2. So Zhao Zhongwan, Aidan Brady. Well, you'd expect Zhao Zhongwan to roll over Brady. Michael Kethro, having drawn with Zhao Zhongwan, gets Rishi Sardana, another good test, and as a bonus he gets another white, so that is a bit surprising. Gene Nikauchi against Stephen Solomon. They've got a long history, these two. When Gene was just a junior, he played a match against Stephen Solomon. I think he got absolutely massacred, something like 7.5 out of 8 for Solomon. And after that, Gene absolutely got the hang of Solomon, and in weekenders he started beating him over and over again. Solomon has rather corrected the score since then, but this is an anything-could-happen game. And another really interesting one, 14-year-old Sravan Renjith against 39-year-old Gareth Charles. So that will be tough, and Renjith is in fact the higher seed, so Charles will have his problems. Anything interesting further down? Mars Chi has a tough one against New South Wales champion Jack Rogers. 2 young players, Jaden Noy and Tejas Datta, meeting each other. And Zarui Singh is still not paired, so he's presumably still ill. By now his buys are becoming 0-point buys, unfortunately. And Lillian Liu, Australian Girls Champion, is yet to get on the scoreboard, but against Adam Vag, she must have a very good chance. So the next roundup for this round, for round 3 rather, will be at 8 o'clock Australian Eastern Time tonight, and from tomorrow there will be full commentary starting at 10:30 in the morning, commentary of the whole round right through the weekend, and on the final day I'll have a couple of roundups, but those rounds start earlier. So anyway, hopefully you can stay up for an 8 o'clock summary of this round, and we are starting to get title players playing each other, and so in Grandmasters and International Masters against FIDE Masters at the moment, so we'll see how that goes. All the best, and yep, thanks for tuning in. Bye.